Hello everyone, welcome back. I am MathMan023. Today I'm going to be giving you some tips and tricks on how to push your Barley higher and get better at him. So first I'm going to do a brief overview of some of his stats. Now Barley attacks by lobbing bottles at enemies doing splash damage. And for each attack he deals 952 damage per second, but since Barley's attacks come out in 2 ticks, it actually totals up to be 1,904 damage, which is quite a lot of damage. It's more damage than most people think Barley would have. And comparing to other throwers, this is less than Dynamite and less than Tick. But since Tick normally doesn't deal damage with all 3 of his mines, only 1 or 2, it is effectively more damage than Tick's. And his health is at 3,360, which ties him for many brawlers, such as Piper. And this is more health than Tick, but less than Dynamite. And his super, he throws out a barrage of 5 bottles, dealing damage in a huge area. And you can only get hit by 1 of those bottles at a time. The damage doesn't stack, but it lasts for 4 seconds, which totals up to be 3,808 damage in total, which is a lot of damage at its max potential. Now, his first super is Medical Use, where he regains 400 health from each attack, which allows him to survive and stay in the fight way longer. And his second star power, Extra Noxious, adds 140 damage per second, which is 280 damage added extra in total if both ticks of damage hit on an enemy. And Barley should use Medical Use in modes where survivability is key, and it is key to stay in the fight and attack. So this would be good for Solo Showdown, Duo Showdown, Hot Zone currently, and that's about it. Although you could make a case for using it in modes such as Heist or Siege. No, not Heist, Gem Grab or Siege, where survivability might be important if you need gems. And Barley's second star power, Extra Noxious, is useful in modes where Barley wants to deal more damage, where there might be more tanks, for example. This will be useful in modes like Brawl Ball, Heist, Gem Grab, Siege, and pretty much all the other modes that aren't Bounty or Hot Zone or Showdown. Barley's best modes are Heist, Siege, Hot Zone at the moment, for as long as it stays out, and Duo Showdown, especially if you have a tank as your partner, so that you don't have to continuously check bushes. However, you can make a case for using him on some Solo Showdown maps, and for some specific Gem Grab maps that have lots of walls. For Siege and Heist, Extra Noxious is going to be the better star power, since you're going to want to deal damage to the safe, to the Ike, and to enemies in the area, while for Hot Zone and Duo Showdown, his better star power is going to be Medical Use, to give him the added survivability. Well, so much for a brief overview. That took longer than expected. Now, without further ado, let me get into my 5 tips that will help you push your Barley. The first thing that will help you push your Barley is to manually aim all of your shots. Some brawlers like Bull and Shelly are good with auto-aim, but other brawlers like Piper are way better when you manually aim with them. Barley falls into the second category. This helps him get both ticks of damage on moving targets instead of only 1 tick or 0. The only time I really ever auto-aim is when an enemy is right on top of me, because it's inconvenient to drag your shot such a short distance. It's good to get into this habit of manually aiming by manually aiming your shots on every single target, including boxes in Showdown and the safe in Heist. I do this and it helps me get into the mindset to manually aim instead of just going for the easy way and auto-aiming. Once you start manually aiming, a second tip is to predict the movements of enemies. This helps you get both ticks of damage down instead of only 1, greatly increasing Barley's usefulness. However, it can be tough to predict where an enemy might move, but you can predict movement very well if you pay attention to a couple of key details. Tanky brawlers will typically move towards you if they are close, since they have more health than you, but will usually run away when they are low on health or at a long range. Low health, long range brawlers like to keep their distance and will usually stay away from you. A third tip that goes along with the previous one is to know where enemies often go in the mode or the map, otherwise known as the choke points of the map. These include the gem mine and gem grab, bolts that spawn in siege, and the bases in hot zone. Individual maps also have plenty of their own choke points where enemies are likely to move. To learn these, it is best to just continue to play that specific map and pay attention to the movement patterns of enemies. Just like how every different map has different bounce opportunities for Rico, every map has a different choke point which Barley can utilize and control. By throwing your attacks in those locations, you are able to control the map for your team, cut off access to enemies, and if the enemies still walk through, deal and charge your super and be a detriment to them. Barley is one of the best control brawlers in the game. By attacking at the map's choke points, he can turn the tide of the game very easily. A fourth tip about control is knowing how to use his super. Sometimes it is good to use it for damage, although not very often, and most of the time it is great for control. When I use my super, I almost always walk away from him throwing it. Since Barley's super does not come out all at once like Mike's super does, rather in 5 different bottles, retreating from his super allows it to land later and spread out more, giving even more controllability to an already controlling super. His super can be used for damage, though, against high health enemies, like the Ike turret or the heist safe, or when enemies are attacking the Ike turret or your heist safe, or for the robot in Siege. His super can be thrown behind enemies to prevent enemies from escaping, but it forces enemies to move back towards your team, allowing them to finish them off. His super is, in my opinion, the most controlling attack in the entire game, and if you master how to use his super, you can just completely control the map for about 5 seconds. It's great to cover the zone in hot zone, which covers it for 5 seconds, turning the tide for your team, and it's also good to deter enemies from bolts or gems, especially if there are many in that area. The 5th tip, and most important tip, is to know how to use walls to your advantage. Walls are your friends. If you are a Barley and don't use walls to your advantage, you're clearly doing something wrong. As long as you're behind a wall, you can hit enemies without them hitting you, unless the enemy is a thrower, in which case you can remember the first 4 points to be better than them. Barley should be constantly rotating around walls and between walls, never letting enemies get any chances to attack him. As long as you can do this, it's almost like a 3-on-2 for your team, since you can keep hitting the enemies without them attacking you. As long as you are able to rotate around walls, the enemies are never going to be able to get to you, allowing you to just keep controlling the map for your team and pushing enemies back. So for summary, point number 1, manually aim your shots. Number 2, by manually aiming your shots, you should then start to learn the movements of the enemies. And number 3, if you can do that, you might know where they're going to go, so you can aim for the choke points of the map. Point number 4 is to use your super well and walk backwards away from it, so you can provide even more control for the map. And point number 5, use walls to your advantage. If you can master all of these points, you're well on your way to becoming an expert Barley player. I followed all these tips and I managed to get my Barley up to rank 30 and 1,000 trophies, and ended up being at one point the 3rd best in the United States. So if you can do this, I'm sure it'll also work for you. Barley, although it does say thrower on his label, is especially great as a support and a control brawler and should be played as such. He should be used not really as an offensive player, mostly as a control player for your team to capitalize on opportunities. If you have any more detailed questions about how to use Barley, you can just drop a comment down below and I'll be sure to respond in detail to whatever question you may be asking. Thanks, hope you enjoyed this video, and have fun playing Barley. Thank you. Barley.